The Sanskrit word for world is samsara. Samsara means that which comes and goes. So if you're dependent on any aspect of the world, you are committing yourself to tremendous agony, trauma and stress, because there is no dependability. You have no insurance whatsoever. So therefore, the way out of this is not to improve the world. Because by improving the world, you're not changing things. It will still remain samsara, that which comes and goes. So, all that you can do to protect yourself, to insure yourself against the shocks of the world, is the shock absorber is rise above the three gunas. So here he's telling us how these three gunas bind us. O Bharata, sattva adheres to happiness, rajas to action, tamas shrouds knowledge and fastens to carelessness. So he summarizes the three types of attachments that we have to the world. All three gunas bind us to the world. So let's take the first one. Sattva adheres to happiness. Happiness not of realization, but relative happiness. See, it's like this. In the olden days means before the Bombay-Pune expressway came up, one car journey to Pune was heart-rending because there was no guarantee. It might take 4 hours, it might take 24 hours. Right? We've all experienced that. So at that time, what you did is, okay, not you, the system. They got us the expressway, and now you have a beautiful road, and then you want a very pleasant experience, so you get into the best car that's available. Maybe you get yourself a Mercedes, and you get the divine music. You're a sattvic individual, so you get classical music, divine music that you play in the car, and you get the best of food. Everything is set. You get into the car and start moving. God forbid there's an accident somewhere and you get stuck for 8 hours. Will you be happy? No. Why? Because you've got into the Mercedes and you've got the best of music and the best of air conditioning, the most comfortable seat, everything, not to stay put there, only to take you to your destination, which is Pune. Similarly, friends, in life, you get into sattva, sattvic happiness, only to enable you to get to your destination, which is beyond the three gunas. So sattva is only a vehicle that gets you to your destination. Nobody in the world wants to stay put in the vehicle. If you get attached to it, it's like you're loving your car so much that you want to spend the night there. Nobody will want it. You might have the best car in the world, but you don't want to get stuck there. So therefore, sattva attaches to happiness, to bliss. The thing we need to remember is, don't be content with anything in the world. However much happiness it gives you, remember one thing, it's temporary, it's passing, it's fleeting. It will not remain with you for long. So therefore, don't get attached to it. Don't get involved with it. Keep moving. Rajas binds to action. Oh, you have to meet a person who's restless, constantly active, because the desires are moving in the mind at such a frenetic pace that it doesn't let him remain still. Everything is done super fast. Every moment he comes, visits your home, he sits for 5 minutes, gets up, pacing up and down. Haven't you seen people like that? Rajas binds to action. Desire in activity, too many desires. And tamas, because your wisdom, your knowledge is completely shrouded, you get attached to a life of reckless indifference. This is the worst. People are heedless of their position, their health, their wealth, their prestige. They become crude, vulgar, violent, rude. The language that people use is pitiable. How can a human being who's made of such sattvic, such refined qualities, stoop down to such. The fact that you can even think such thoughts is despicable. Total heedlessness. There are people, after getting cirrhosis of the liver, continue to drink. There are people who, after getting cancer, both the lungs are finished, continue to smoke. I mean, is heedless of consequences to themselves and the pain that they cause to others. This is tamas, pramada. And all of us, see, we've given examples of extreme tamas, but what you need to understand is all of us have this in some degree. Somewhere it's functioning. So you have to identify it and pluck it out of your system. Next verse.
रजस्तमश्चाभिभूय सत्वं भवति भारत रजसत्वं तमश्चैव तमसत्वं रजस्तथा.
O Bharata, sattva prevails by predominating over rajas and tamas. Similarly, rajas prevails over sattva and tamas. So also tamas prevails over sattva and rajas. Now, so far he has been describing or discussing the gunas in isolation. But the gunas do not exist in isolation. Every single human being, or in fact living being, is a combination of the three. So what he's explaining here is all human beings have all three gunas. What happens when one particular guna predominates over the other two is the question. And that's all that you can hope to get, predominance of a certain guna. So these three predominate at different times, we've already seen. But within the personality, you have, say, some people have 70% sattva, 20% rajas, 10% tamas. Such a person would fall under the first category. Sattva predominates over rajas and tamas. Others have 80% rajas, 15% sattva and 5% tamas. Such a person would be the second category, where rajas prevails over sattva and tamas, and so on, a predominantly tamasic individual. Having taken this into consideration, they then divided humanity into 4 varnas or castes. You've heard of the caste system, but what you know of the caste system is very different from the caste system that was originally conceived. So the caste system was not based on family background, in other words, who your father was, but it was more based on the proportion of sattva, rajas, tamas in your personality. So the highest caste was Brahmana, where they were predominantly sattvic in nature. Okay? They had a little bit of rajas and traces of tamas, very little tamas. Next comes Kshatriya. Kshatriya was one who is predominantly rajasic, and the sattva went down, and there was the tamas increase, little bit of tamas. But a Kshatriya still had a fair amount of sattva, enough to become righteous, noble kings. Vaishyas were the business community where the tamas crept in, sattva went down, and rajas was kept going. And a Shudra is one who is predominantly tamasic with a little bit of rajas and traces of sattva. Okay? Now remember this. This classification is not based on parentage, but it is based on your individual composition. So in other words, the son of a Brahmin can be a Shudra and vice versa. But what happened is, and these 4 castes, this classification was made not to put down the lower caste, and give privileges to the upper caste. This was not the intention. The intention was very noble, so that each person identified his inner composition, understood which caste he belonged to, and gave himself or herself a vocation or a field of activity that matched the inner composition in such a way that every single individual, never mind what the composition is, could rise to the highest levels of sattva and go beyond it to the state of self-realization. This is the intention with which it was done. But then what happened is, like in all societies, is as you come later on, you'll understand, to maintain that sattva requires effort. You need to put in effort. But also, once you reach that predominance of sattva, life becomes so easy that you tend to get complacent. And when you get complacent, what happens? Sattva drops. So that's what happened in society. The sattvic content dropped. And the wise people of the time decided to segregate the Brahmins. Not to give them privileges, but so that they would retain the sattvic content and maintain society, or at least lead society with it. And it worked for centuries. Then there was complete degeneration. And along with this degeneration, what happened is the Brahmins forgot that they were supposed to maintain the sattvic content only to do service to humanity. And they started abusing the position that they were given. So also the Kshatriyas. And there was a lot of injustice done too. First of all, the whole system got rigid, where the son of a Brahmin was considered Brahmin irrespective of what his inner personality was. So anyway, the point is, when you understand that one of the three gunas predominates in your system, then you know where you belong in this hierarchy. And you give yourself a vocation according to your constitution, not according to your birth. When sattva predominates, the first thing that happens is you become independent of the world. You find the world doesn't have the power to provoke you. Today, we are so susceptible. Anybody says something, you get provoked into reacting. Most of us are reacting all the time. That's what a rajasic person is. A tamasic person, without provocation, erupts. A rajasic person needs to be provoked. A sattvic person will never get provoked. It's impossible. So, this is what he describes in verse 10, and then he moves on to 11.
सर्वद्वारेषु देहेऽस्मिन् प्रकाश उपजायते ज्ञानं यदा तदा वेद्यात् विवृद्धं सत्त्वमेत्युत.
Now he goes on to describe what happens when sattva predominates in our personality. It's a beautiful description. Throughout, he keeps addressing Arjuna as Bharata in the last few verses, to bring home the point that as Indians, we are born with this predominance of sattva. Even now, in spite of the degeneration, we have more than the average quantum of sattva. Please understand that. And therefore, it becomes our responsibility to operate out of that sattva and lead not only ourselves, our people, but the world. The world is looking desperately towards India for spiritual guidance, for sattva. And where are we? We are looking for an American visa. By hook or by crook, if we get a visa, toehold into America. What a sad state that we don't know our own greatness. So anyway, he says, when the light of wisdom radiates through all the doors of this body, then it should be known that sattva is predominant. Will Durant, in his book Story of Civilization, has said, India will teach us the tolerance and gentleness of the mature mind, the quiet content of the unacquisitive soul, the calm of the understanding spirit, and a unifying, pacifying love for all beings. Where is this and where are we? We're unable to love our own people. Never mind the whole being. So, sarvadvareshu dehesmin prakasha upajayate. Through all the gates of our personality. What are the gates of our personality? Jnanendriyas, organs of perception. Karmendriyas, organs of action. Manas, mind. Buddhi, intellect. So this light of Atman shines forth when sattva predominates. Why only sattva? Because when the light of Atman is there, this prakasha is there everywhere. But rajas and tamas they block it. If you build a wall and then expect the light to come through, then complain, oh, I don't have light, I'm in darkness. So when sattva predominates, the light shines forth, and everything about a sattvic individual becomes brilliant. It describes it beautifully. Jnanendriya's perception becomes clear, sharp. You have insight. That's what, if you go and see a movie which has a message, not a silly movie, a sattvic individual instantly, immediately gets the point. This is the point of the movie. You see things that others miss. This is typical of a sattvic individual. That's why you find people who are sharp in any area, whether it is business or sport or music or whatever it be. Where there is a sattvic individual, automatically he gets into a leadership position because he sees things and he's able to spot. The other day we were talking to a, what do you call that? Investment banker, isn't it? So what is it that makes a person identify a company and say, this is the company that will grow? You have to have insight. And that insight comes only with sattva. Now where is the sattvic content being? First of all, you don't recognize it. You're not making any effort to improve it. And then you become a hotshot investment banker for what? After the company makes profits, then you say, this is a good company. It's a big deal. Same thing with anything. You've got to be able to spot the potential long before it's manifest. That is perception. Then actions, karmendriyas. You become daksha. The 12th chapter of the Gita gives 35 qualities of a bhakta, 35 qualities of a devotee of God. And in that he gives 2 qualities, amazing qualities, apparently contradictory, but only when they're together does it make for a sattvic individual. The 2 qualities he gives are udasina and daksha. Udasina, unconcerned, apparently indifferent, not indifferent. And daksha, expert, skillful, smart, alert. The 2 qualities seem contradictory to each other, but in fact they are not. What it means is, you perform actions as if your life depends on every action, with complete commitment, total commitment, apparently involved. And yet, within yourself, you're udasina, you're unconcerned with the action, you're totally unconcerned with the fruit of the action. Why are you unconcerned with this action? Because you're concerned with getting beyond the world. So you have no axe to grind. You're not a stakeholder in anything in the world. Then you might wonder, then why do you perform it perfectly? You want to perform actions perfectly only because this will get you there. So your karmendriyas, your actions are perfect, effortless excellence. You want to know what effortless excellence is what, what's his name? Yuvraj Singh played yesterday. Effortlessly. But you sit there and labor over it and think over every movement, that's rajas. So then comes the mind. The mind entertains pure love for all beings because again, there is no return that you want from anyone. You're sitting, suppose you're sitting in a garden and you see a bird, a beautiful bird come in, just fly in, and it's sitting on the branch of a tree for a while, it sings for a while and then it flies away. You simply admire it. You love it for what it is. If you say, let me capture it and clip its wings and put it in a cage, you've spoiled it. It's rajas. But sattva is where you admire things for what they are, as they are, where they are, without any desire to acquire it, without any desire to capitalize on it, to leverage it for any personal interest. That is the beauty of sattva. So similarly, with individuals, all relationships are maintained beautifully. But there is no attachment. There is love for all. There is no attachment to any. Emotions of the mind are controlled. There is no unbridled desire. You convert the weakness of an emotion into a strength. This is the characteristic of sattva. Then intellect. There is clarity of thinking rather than confusion. There are people who there are PhDs and double PhDs, but internally they're totally confused. But a sattvic person is one who may be illiterate, uneducated, but he has total clarity of mind. And this clarity comes because he has trained his intellect to distinguish between the world and that which is beyond the world. And a person who has this basic discrimination will never go wrong. A sattvic individual carries on in life like a sakshi witness, never gets involved in anything. Like Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage, and all men and women mere players. They have their exits and their entrances. If you want to admire a painting, you have to take a few steps back and watch it from a distance. And only when you get the totality picture do you really admire the painting for what it is. If you stand 2 inches from the huge painting, you think you're going to make sense of it. That's what we're doing with the world. We are myopic, so you're going like this. So, Sarva dvareshu dehesmin prakasha upajayate. When the light of wisdom radiates through all the doors of this body, then it should be known that sattva is predominant. So therefore, friends, this wonderful state of predominance of sattva is your birthright. Is the reason why you are born in this country, to get to that predominance of sattva. I wish there was a rule which said that only those who are predominantly sattvic were to get the Indian passport. I wonder how many of us will get. Instantly population problem will be handled. So, for now, we've come to the end of this session.